you so much for joining us today for WIGI's Open World Dialogue. Usually, we host our Open World Dialogue sessions on LinkedIn Live to create open conversations within the WIGI community. However, I am so excited to open up the stage to our guest today, who is calling in from Finland. I am so happy to be opening up our platform overseas and garner a different story within the world of gaming. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Crystal Sanchez, and I'm your host for today's Open World Dialogue session. I graduated from UCI back in 2020 and have since been able to work with communities within the AI, NFT, and e-commerce space, creating social media content, connecting with users, collaborating with influencers, and more. My passion, however, has always been within gaming, and it's so important that we have organizations like WIGI that foster a community of individuals who are able to learn from each other and further grow their careers within the industry. For those of you who don't know, WIGI is a nonprofit with a mission to cultivate resources like this session to advance the economic equality and diversity of the global games industry. WIGI champions a safe, inclusive, and diverse workforce in the video games, tabletop, and esports industries. And we are using this open world dialogue session to highlight the work of Dina Ramse. Dina is an experienced marketing specialist within the crowdfunding niche for indie games, and she's raised over 10 million on Kickstarter for various tabletop games and leads a team offering social media, product development, and marketing services. I am so excited to jump into the world of tabletop. Dina, do you mind giving us a brief introduction?
Sure, yeah. I am Dina. I'm a Norwegian who 7 years ago now started a company for crowdfunding tabletop games. Um, I have a team of five that we work every day on various projects. I run all of the project management, and it's a great group. We are all over the world, so we have people in like US, in France, and also here in Finland, and then the UK. We do a bunch of conventions for our clients. We offer um, like you said, marketing and social media assistance with strategies, consultations, as well as just making their campaign pages and videos. So we do have like a 3D modelator and everything in our team. So it's a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, firstly, I'm so interested in your experience within crowdfunding. What can you share about what drew you to specialize in crowdfunding for tabletop games? And what has been your most rewarding campaign so far?
I choosing which who's your favorite baby has never been easy, really. I love them all equally. They are fantastic. We've had so much fun with the different clients that we worked with over the years. So it's really hard to be like that one was fantastic. I think if I had to choose one, I think just because we got to try out different tactics that we don't usually get to do, we worked with Tessa Collective, which is one of our
Mhm.
American clients. They had a game where you're playing in the board game. You are rescuing people from the zombie apocalypse, and we
Uh-huh.
got to work with a bunch of dog influencers and basically put all of these very famous Instagram dogs into the game, as well as offering it for people who have like their dog that they wanted to have in their game, so that we would then create special cards for everyone. And the interactions during that campaign was fantastic because we did a couple of conventions. We had people come up and be like how talking about how they were memorializing their dogs who had passed away earlier, and now they got to play with them again, and that was such a fantastic experience.
That sounds incredible. And also, I feel like working with dog influencers is like the best kind of influencer to work with. They're all so cute.
They are fantastic. Yeah. So it was really fun to sort of play along with that and trying it out as a different sort of way of running a crowdfunding campaign. So usually we focus a lot on gamers specifically, and like both on Twitch and Instagram and various sort of social platforms and like play experiences. But being able to send over a couple of games to both shelters, and so we were working with a couple of no-kill shelters during the campaign, as
Mhm.
well as a dog influencer. It was very different from what we usually do. So we were all super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of speaking about the marketing strategies for the different campaigns, how do you tailor your marketing strategies specifically for tabletop games compared to other types of indie projects?
So Very often we start by looking at the game and the creators because I find that every creator is different. They come with their own skills, they have their own favorite things that they like and their own strength. And then we
Hmm.
try to play along towards that and utilize that as much as possible during the campaign so that no campaigns will really look the same. Sometimes we have people who are great at graphic design. Sometimes we work with people who are fantastic at in-game experiences and they're really love playing games with other people. So we'll maybe make them a little tour and they'll be at different gaming cafes, or we send them up to bigger conventions around the world. And it really depends like what kind of personality they have. Because if they're terrible at teaching their own game and don't love that experience themselves, you don't do that to people. Then we'll do
Yeah.
that. We love it. And then we play to everyone's strengths so we can kind of balance it that way. So, yeah, we sit down, we talk about the game, we learn more about the people. I used to be a neurolinguistic programming coach back in the
Hmm.
day. So I'm using a lot of those tools in order to sort of find out like what kind of path do you want? And then we build that and find a way that we can still reach success and also playing to what they can do and what they cannot do. So finding our strength and our limitations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like how you take the time to connect with the creators and understand what kind of people they are. And this is definitely more of a personal question. I love conventions. What kind of conventions do you decide, like where to send these creators?
So we start always with geographical, so whatever is the closest. When are they launching? What kind of games do they have? And then we match the conventions and the events available to them. So like we have some people who will only drive 2 hours away from their house. We have also other people who are like, yeah, I got 1,000 flight miles. Like send me anywhere as long as it's a good fit for my game. So we have a really long spreadsheet with a lot of different conventions, usual sort of attendee numbers, what kind of people are attending, so that we have a good profile, and then we match
Hmm.
based on that. So if it is a campaign game or if it's anything that has to do about anime, they're very different conventions you'd attend.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. But I think that's a fantastic way of getting them to connect with their audience and, getting a firsthand look at how people interact with the game, how they interact with the story, the characters, everything about it. I
Yeah.
think that in-person connection is just so important and so, interesting.
It's absolutely one of my favorites way because you get to see them sort of blossom within the community as you're getting closer to the campaign, and they also get
Mhm.
more sort of familiar with teaching their own games as well. Lots of positive interactions, and it lets themselves so easily to like good social content as well. So we're kind of one swash around, and we get as much out of it as possible.
Oh, absolutely. So specifically within Kickstarter, just because I know, Kickstarter's its own demon, and there's a lot of different marketing strategies that you can utilize while promoting a Kickstarter. What are some unique challenges you faced when promoting and running Kickstarter campaigns for tabletop games?
I think the biggest one is probably that tabletop has essentially 3 seasons. It
Hmm.
is the early beginning of the year campaigns, like before Easter. Everyone is sort of thinking about what they didn't get that they wanted for Christmas, and it is what kind of games do we want to have for Christmas next year. So it's that kind of
Uh-huh.
thinking. And then we have the season after Easter up until summer holidays, which is very often there will be like card games, smaller box games because people are going to holidays. They don't want to spend too much money. So we see like lower price points are really good. There is also, we started a project called Micro Game May that we managed to pitch into Kickstarter and they picked it up. I saw also Game Fund was running their own version of it called Pocket Games.
Hmm.
Which is great. I thought that was fantastic. We worked together with one of our clients to create that project with Microgame May for like 2 years in advance. We created a whole community around it. And last year we had 30 something game designers who all launched their own small box games, which was so much fun. The year before we did 29, whereas 10 of them
Hmm.
were our clients. So we're really trying to sort of help the community grow with us. Um, and then the last season is after summer holidays, sort of before Halloween. Anything outside of
Hmm.
those seasons typically will have low attendance numbers. You have to push a lot harder for marketing. So we're talking like you gotta have like 30 for 40,000 plus in advertisement. While as in these
Hmm.
seasons, it's easier to grab the people. People are always interested in things, and the traffic is much higher.
That's so interesting. I never really thought much about like tabletop, um, or different seasons where tabletop like really seems to thrive. But I mean, it's completely true. Like you're finding connections within like Christmas and like these holidays, and it's very interesting. I'd
Yeah.
love to know more about you. What got you into tabletop? Is it something you grew up playing? And what was the one game that really just drew you in?
Oh, okay, so this is more like an unusual story, I would say, because I grew up in a family, so I'm a foster child. The foster family I grew up with does not play games. It was
Hmm.
a very, very religious family, so gaming wasn't really a thing. I got emancipated at 14, and one of the first things I got to do was to play games with my friends and my biological family. So we played a role playing game and we had a game night and we played Labyrinth from Ravensburger. It's this
Hmm.
cute little game about going around, moving tiles around, and solving a labyrinth, and then you pick up treasures and creatures. And after that night, I built a great friend group around gaming really, and I spent the next couple of years sort of catching up on everything I didn't know anything about. So I got a Nintendo 64 the same year, and I played every single sort of classic game that I could find, and dived really hard as only sort of ADHD autistic people do, to filling all the knowledge gap. I joined role playing games. I became a game master a couple of years later for hire. So
Hmm.
I traveled around all over Europe running games uh, quite early on. And I also worked in an organization in Norway called Hyperion, where we were
Hmm.
organizing the larger conventions in Norway. Um, so then naturally sort of I've surrounded myself with games. And helped out with
Yeah.
indie marketing as my first campaign that I helped out on was with Colophon, which is a book publisher in Norway called By. I was helping both as a proofreader and playtester on that project. And since
Hmm.
then, I just joined anything that I could in order to learn as much as possible. And now I've probably worked on somewhere around 3, 4, 500 games.
Oh my goodness. But I do love that you just started collecting experiences and placing them in your basket. And like you said, you're filling the gaps of the game industry. And that's the best way to do it. It's by learning, by involving yourself. I am
Yeah.
so interested in your history of a game master. Did you collaborate with like an organization and go about that? Or how did you find that opportunity?
So my community were gamers. I was diehard into the RPG scene, the indie scene
Hmm.
specifically, and it was having a massive hit just around the time when I started joining in as well. I worked together with the organization that I was in to get games recognized as art in the
Hmm.
European Union. So I was one of the people helping out writing papers and sending them around, which was a fantastic project. It took a couple of years, but in the same vein, my friends were making their own games. We had game jams every year where we would create indie games. I would create a couple, and then we would try each other games. So um, it sort of naturally lent to them people wanting me to run games as well because they understood that I had a good voice for it. I love sort of active collaboration and creating this sort of symposium of storytelling together. So I'll sort of jump off whatever people are creating. I'm huge fan of say yes and
Yeah. Improv 101. Yes.
yes. And it was a convention in Oslo called Archon that I was a part of when I was 18. And I had been handed a scenario that I was going to run. So So I volunteered because the person who had written it couldn't be there. So it was a bunch of really sort of fractured notes, and was like, yeah, I could probably run it. Very, very confident. The audacity. And I had never run the system before. I had never run any games in the system. Obviously, I knew of it, so I was like, "Oh, it's a D10 pool system, whatever." And I think
Hmm.
it was Vampire Masquerade or Requiem, one of those. And I'd played the other one. And during the game, a couple of the other game masters, who was sort of considered no ways best, was walking around, sort of listening in, and he stopped in my room, and he just could not leave because he was so captivated. And he's like, after I got scared, he said to me afterwards, like, "You made me scared. I had no idea what was going to happen." And I was like, "I'm just reading notes and I'm doing it as dramatic as I can, just tapping into, theater kid style as best as I could," even though I was never a theater kid. I was the person who knew everyone's lines and would sew costumes. So, and after that, they gave me an award for just being really good at running the game. I ended up running a lot of games that year and the following years, and then I just had started getting people asking me if they could pay me to run games. So I was like, yeah, yeah, I'll do it. And this is
Yeah,
what I'm talking about.
absolutely.
And then I later moved to the UK when I was 21, and then they paid for my flights to go back to Norway for a month to run games for a camp for school kids during their summer holiday. So I basically stayed in
Hmm.
Norway for a whole month, full paid, and I was running games from early morning until 4 o'clock, together with a couple of other game masters.
Oh my goodness. Wait, that sounds amazing. And I play D&D. I could never be the head game master. It's so much work putting together a storyline, keeping all of your players engaged. But I love that that's the role that you just like naturally fell into. That's incredible.
I think it really helps because I don't plan everything in advance. I'm just really good at holding everyone's threads together and
Yeah.
seeing connections where there are not there, or maybe they are. I mean, um, yeah, it just comes really natural to me. And just being able to sort of play off the players. I worked on Pathfinder later as one
Hmm.
of the play testers for it. And we ran a game there for 2.5 years while it was still in sort of prototyping alpha to beta state. And those players, they all ended up becoming their own game masters in other games as they moved out afterwards. And it was just fantastic to just know that there are now like 10 more game masters out in the world because I ran a game that we were just like, yeah, well, someone's got to run it, right? We got to learn something. And it was just super cool to be sort of part of both sort of preparing the future with more game masters as well as being able to test some rather large games. I mean, Pathfinder was huge when it came out.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And kind of speaking about playtesting, I'd love to kind of get your opinion on the difference of being a playtester versus like a marketer. How do you kind of fit yourself into those different roles?
When I call myself the worst playtester because I will be automatically defaulting into a playtesting role. I used to work for Electronic Art as a tester, so one of the
Hmm.
biggest tasks is play dumb. And it becomes like almost like a persona you just take on, and then you're the dumbest player ever. You're like, I don't understand. How do I start this game? And it's so funny because I can't turn it off. Whenever it's an unpublished game, I am
Hmm.
terrible. And I just automatically just like, oh yeah, now I have no idea. Games, yeah, probably. And I will ask all of the dumb questions because it makes people think and it's what they need
Hmm.
usually. While as when you're a marketer, you have to be the smart person. You're the ones who are seeing all of the connections. So then you're going back to sort of like the game master role where you're pulling in all the threads and you're like, okay, so you're good at this, so we can do this thing, we can do this thing, and sort of pull it all together and plan out a project within seconds in your head.
Hmm. I do like the fact that within playtesting, you brought up play dumb because it's true. You never know who's playing the game and who's clicking on what and who's trying to interact with, a tree or, civilian. So I feel like you definitely have to give that different perspective, especially to the people who kind of see it from an all knowing kind of perspective where they're not thinking about like the little
Exactly.
details. Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
cool.
One of my funniest moments when I was doing as a playtester for video games was I was delivering a bug report that was 1.5 page long for to
Mhm.
replicate, and I tried every other way of doing it, but it was like 2 characters, when you did these actions only in this particular world with this sequence, then it would happen, and it was just like the wildest thing, and they were like, "There's no one who's gonna do that," and I'm like, "I did." I'm sure someone else is. It was just so funny. They were like, "What is even like, how do you replicate it?" And I was like, "Oh, I have a document."
No, I'm the
Figure
type
it
of player,
out.
I feel like I put so many hours into a game, but it's because I'm like, "What if this does something? But this might do something else." It's oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But it
So, yeah,
definitely is interesting.
it is absolutely. I will never look at Sims or FIFA the same way ever again. I mean, after all of those hours just sort of smashing buttons and being the dumbest player that you could possibly imagine. And it was a
Oh,
lot
no.
of fun, but also it was like I was absolutely exhausted for video games. I was running semi-pro in World of Warcraft alongside this as well. So it was a lot of screen time and
Mhm.
I was getting really tired of it. So
Yeah.
I stopped working with video games and I did mobile for a while because I was like, "Well, at least I get a smaller screen." So I worked for King Games, Candy Crush and Bubblicious Sagas and all of those things. And then I was just like, no, actually, I'm going to go back to what I really, really love, which is, tabletop games.
Mhm. So you've really experienced, like, all of these different types of games within the gaming industry. That's incredible. Not everyone can say that. What are the biggest differences that you find within the 3 different types, mobile, tabletop, and normal video games?
I think for mobile games, there isn't as much as community. Obviously,
Mhm.
there's communities after the games are there that you can sort of create, and there's this sort of like, oh, you play Candy Crush, like an example. My mother loves Candy Crush, and whenever she sees people around, she's like, "Oh, my daughter works on that." And then they'll talk about Candy Crush and they'll compare the levels or whatever. But beyond that, there isn't really sort of a community. So a lot of it is, pushed ads in other
Mhm.
games on, digital platforms. And we see like, what is it, June's Journey on YouTube on like every other YouTuber currently who is like, yeah, this is great. It's a point and click adventure. So it is very much reliant upon, advertising. While as video
Mhm.
games, you can create, especially if they're indie, communities around it in advance. Like TikTok is huge for this. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're an indie studio and you're not on TikTok, like what are you even doing at this point? And it's really cool because they get to show off, like their failures, their bloopers, their journey, and people really love seeing it. And there's a big sort of like really grassroots efforts. Well,
Mhm.
and while that does work, they're still, very reliant on pushing a lot of ads. Well, we have had fantastic campaigns in crowdfunding that has just been grassroots efforts. It's playing the game with people, be it online, conventions, events. It is having other people run the games for you in places. It's one-on-one connections, and you can still do really well and then you can
Mhm.
top it off with ads. So the advertisement isn't always as important as just the connections and building the community while you are working yourself and getting ready for the crowdfunding. So it allows you to do so much more with
Mhm.
people because obviously tabletop games are much more social unless you're an
Yeah.
MMORPG and it doesn't you are entirely relied upon being able to play with people unless it's a solo game. which, it had a huge wave during the pandemic, but solo games are, it's a small niche. Not everyone is gonna do that or love it. So it's so much more reliant upon, like, conventions, you gotta show it, be it Gen Con, Essenspiel, UK Games Expo, Origins are one of those bigger ones, and if you're missing out on those opportunities, it's
Hmm.
very often you'll launch the crickets and people will be like, "I never heard about your games, I never saw it." And you get, occasionally there'll be, like, sleeper hits that were maybe at one convention, they'll have an okay-ish campaign that barely funded or just about sort of broke even, and then 2 or 3
Hmm.
years later, people then start discovering the game, and it'll have a big dip or something. But the
Yeah.
journeys are very different that way.
That's incredible. So I know that you mentioned that tabletop is mostly grassroots efforts, a lot of guerrilla marketing, in-person conversations and experiences. But where do you recommend finding tabletop community online? Or where do you think people are able to find that community, just through the keyboard?
Yeah. So primarily this audience is mid-30s, which is millennials, and they're probably still on Facebook, to be honest. And most of
Hmm.
them have a Discord now, especially after pandemic. Before that, not so much. But there's some fantastic Discord communities, like even Tabletop Simulator has one, Tabletopia has their own. And then obviously all of these sort of organizations within games. There are Facebook communities that also run Discord where there will be
Hmm.
weekly, monthly play testing sessions. And then there are smaller niche ones from either a group of publishers or individual publishers who have started one that sort of spurred on and became bigger than what it was intended to be, where they will run other people's games as well.
Hmm. I guess speaking of that community, through my research of the board games industry while I was preparing for this interview, I kind of stumbled across all of these board game influencers, which, I never really realized that, it was a niche, but oh my goodness, they are present and there are people in their comments and they're always engaged. How often do you find yourself collaborating with these tabletop influencers?
So we have a general rule. We always work with content creators. You can't really do it without content creators. You may try, but then
Yeah.
you're going to have to do more ads. We will, during each of our projects, work somewhere between 5 to maybe 20, 50 creators in varying degrees. We will always send them a game, we'll have them play it. Very often, we will then forward the game so that more and more people can play because a prototype in board games typically will run you $100 to $150 each copy,
Hmm.
which means that if you need 10, that's, that's quite a big chunk of
Yeah, it
money
adds up.
just it really adds up, and then it's, 30 to 15 something in between each creator. So we'll look at where are the creators based. We'll be like, okay, if
Mhm.
you're US, let's try to keep 10 copies in the US. Maybe we'll send 2 or 3 down to Europe. If the creators are in the UK, we'll usually work more with UK creators. If they're somewhere else overseas, like right now, we worked with someone who's in Singapore, so we split it up so that we sent some to the US, some to Europe, some to Asia. Um, and yeah, it really is like, where are they? How many prototypes can you afford to print up early? And then we'll
Mhm.
make the most out of it.
Oh, interesting. And then going off of that, do you find that different types of games perform better, either overseas or maybe one in America versus Singapore versus Europe?
Oh,
Do you find that
absolutely.
different? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people have their preferences, right? Euro games are called Euros for a reason. Ameritrash's games are Ameritrash for a very good reason. And the type of players who play these games, like what we've done with like content creators is that we create a profile for each creator based on their
Mhm.
favorite games and how they have commented or said yes to other projects that we've had. Then, based on the feedback that we're seeing from the community, from them and their player experience, we will then flesh out their profiles more. So when we get a game in, We will then go through our database and match them up with the ones who are the most likely to like your game and the ones who have the most likely audience to really love your game
Uh-huh.
too. And um, while Kickstarter is a 60% ish US customers, in board games, it's sometimes certain titles will do a lot better in Europe in terms of getting people to play it. Or in the US. So it really depends on like style, color choices, theming, mechanics.
Mhm. Interesting. And earlier, I know you mentioned TikTok. I'd love to kind of talk on that a little bit more. Do you feel like crowdfunding methods have kind of transformed over the last few years, especially with the rise of, TikTok lives where you're able to donate to your favorite creators and stuff like that?
So Theater Labs and all those haven't really had any impact on crowdfunding because of the
Okay.
crowdfunding is in order to create games. When we run Kickstarter campaigns, it is to produce a game,
Mhm.
while as crowdfunding live is more like a Patreon. When some of these creators that we work with for indie games will also have a Patreon alongside, but it is a split effort. It's not toward making another game. It is rather community focused. It's about
Mhm.
being able to work together and collaborate with other indie titles. It's to create, we do like game designer retreats, both in the UK,
Mhm.
there's some in Europe that will do more like a Patreon function or like a coffee or whatever. And those are things that you would never run a Kickstarter for.
Mhm. So yeah, so you guys have different events for basically where you are on the timeline of game development and creation.
Yeah, and smaller donations are typically towards content creators rather than indie publishers.
Okay, interesting. Going back to the marketing aspect, I mean, we were chatting about how tabletop is, mostly in person. How much does social media play a role in the evolution of how a game grows?
So we are pretty much reliant on social presence in order to have a successful campaign.
Mhm.
Unless you're like busy, one of the like three large ones. Someone has to be able to play your game and be talking about it and posting about it in order to drive hype. FOMO is such a big thing when it comes to tabletop games. It is wanting to be there, was there, have it, want to have it kind of thing.
Mhm.
Without that sort of extra social pressure or social push, it's very difficult to make a game really take off.
Mhm. No, I can imagine, especially because you do need, I guess that backbone support of, hey, it's the community. It's people who are interested in your product, people who are interested in the story, everything like that. I'd
Mm,
love to know, what role do like visuals, art direction, and storytelling play in the marketing efforts for tabletop games?
everything. Oh my god. So there are obviously minimal requirements in order to be able to have a crowdfunding campaign for a tabletop game. Like obviously your game has to exist, and it has to be interesting and pretty enough looking so that people want to play it. Because if it's
Mhm.
too prototype looking, a lot of the content creators don't want to play it or it won't look great. So we do rely on being able to create and do art for most, if not all, the entire game before it even goes to crowdfunding. Uh, Hence why we produce prototype copies. Um,
Yeah.
and obviously, art and visuals is such a big sort of store part of the storytelling. It is the color choices impacts who's going to like the game, if they like how it looks on the table, your choices of like matte gloss, linen finish, all of these sort of more niche choices in a game. If you're doing a piece, is it wood? Is it metal? Is it ceramic? All of these choices has such a huge impact because there are
Mhm.
niche of people who will be like, I don't want to play a game that has X in it, be it I don't want to play anything that has pawns. I want to play things
Mhm.
that has meeples, or some people will be like, I don't want to play anything that has miniatures. I want standees. Then we do acrylic standees, which can have, color front and back or like color center. And it's a whole thing, and every single choice that you do in terms of the visuals helps tell the story of the game, and it
Mhm.
impacts how likely people are to put it on the table. The prettier it looks, and the better the presentation, and like the feel of the pieces, and the thickness of the cardboard. Like these are all gonna be variables that makes people play it more, and has a stronger staying power, and the FOMO is higher. Uh, for sure.
No, that's absolutely true. Honestly, I would have never thought about, like, what the pieces are made out of, if it's linen, like, the material itself, but it's incredible to see that every single little detail plays a role in a game's ultimate staying power. I love how you mentioned miniatures. I'd love to just ask more of a personal question. Do you feel like the interaction that miniatures have with the gaming community where you design them, you paint them, and then you play with them. Do you feel like they add to the staying power of a role-playing game?
Oh, if you wanna go into a role-playing game, it's very different. There are groups of people in RPG scene that definitely wants the minis, but
Mhm.
not always die hard on the it's coming from the same creators. Very often it's enough if it's a fantasy game, if they have fantasy pieces, so they'll sort of mix and match, and it's not the same sort of like when you're in board games and you have minis on board. I mean, Warhammer is obviously a
Yeah.
huge thing. Warhammer 40K, and how you're painting them, and there's whole niche of people who are like only paint them the way it is on the box kind of
Yeah, it's a
people.
whole community, yeah.
And that's its own community, and then you have the ones who are doing, like, fun things with, like, duochromes and pink, space marines, which is I think is fantastic. It's so cool, and then you have, like, the more sort of campaign driven board games where miniatures comes as part of it, and you'll have men on tables that are interacting around with game elements, may be it moving tiles or monsters that you put onto the table, which looks more like you'd probably be familiar with from like a D&D game with like hex tiles or squares that they're moving around
Yeah.
on. But it's still, it's still a board game in all of the sense that there's a die that you're rolling and you're reading off a book, and you're following sort of a script of a storytelling, and
Mhm.
then however you sort of complete a scenario is the kind of impact it's having. And there are a niche group of like the audience will be very picky on what they want for the board gaming section. Like, oh, I will only do standees or minis, or ideally if they didn't have any of that, because it adds to the weight, which means that this production time is longer, and those things become a consideration. While as
Mhm.
on the other side of like RPGs, uh, I think in terms of like market shares, we haven't
Mhm.
actually done a single campaign in RPGs that came with minis for RPGs. Uh, and I haven't seen too many of them. It's usually like you'll do the RPG, and then if there's enough people who ask from it from your community that you built around it, then maybe you'll release a couple, and they might be like 3D printed at this point.
Mhm. But the great thing about that is there are tons of websites online where you can design your own character down to the little details, and I'll admit, I've
Yeah.
played a D&D campaign where I just used, the little Sony angels? Yeah, I'll just use that as my character and most of it's imagination, so it's
That's
I mean,
amazing.
yeah, completely up to the person, but I really love that perspective. I would love to know, have you noticed any, like, specific trends or preferences within tabletop gaming that influence your campaign strategies? Like, do you see one thing kind of being pushed out, like, let's say online, and you're like, "Okay, we need to kinda highlight that within our next game?"
So definitely one thing that we played around with the last couple of years has been utilizing online platforms like Board Game Arena, which is
Mhm.
huge. in addition to your own launch. So sort of timing it that you're releasing a board game arena over the summer so that people get to try the game and running some event with it, get some content creators to start talking about it, and use that as part of your marketing and release it
Hmm.
in the autumn, which has worked really well for a couple of games already, and it's definitely something that we'll be looking into doing more. So we just released a board game arena earlier this year for a campaign that we're probably going to release next year, so that everyone is familiar now with the base game, and then we come out with the expansion, and then we'll delay it probably a year or so, and we might add the expansion into board game arena afterwards. But it is a
Hmm.
great way to push extra people to see it without having to, ad spends, and we spend time on making it really good.
Yeah. No, I love how you bring up expansions. I think that's such an interesting and also like important aspect to the tabletop industry. You have your base game, you have your like initial audience, but you add on to it, maybe add another world, another character, and you're only expanding your audience. I think that's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and good planning it around, like, when do you wanna release an expansion is a very big topic. It's, your audience has to be ready for the expansion too. It's not just
Hmm.
about your own release strategy. You have to build the desire for more content. So, timing is so important.
Yeah. Just within the base game, I mean, I know you've worked on, all of these games. I'd love to know what I guess the average timeline is looking like from concept to creation, with these board games.
So we will often have our clients typically comes in when the game is in a finished-ish state and it just
Mhm.
needs your 100 plus hours of playtesting with other people outside of their own sort of like not just your sister or your brother or your mom and
Yeah.
dad, like a little bit beyond that. But they have a game. They've had good reception from near families. They want to do it. And then we'll tell them, like go out and play it with other people and we'll show them where to do it, how to get started. And from that first initial call, it's usually like 6, 9 months ish, depending on how big the game is and how much art it needs and where otherwise they are in their journey. The longest
Mhm.
project we ever worked on was about 3 years.
Oh my goodness. Well, I know, like, every project's different and, start at different stages, but they usually start off with the MVP and initial, like, close family playtest?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. It's so interesting to see, like, where they all start and, from there, how long it takes to really kind of blast off, I guess.
Yeah, and then after that, typically we will end working with the creators right after the Kickstarter campaign, and then we will return once the game is in production. And
Mhm.
typically that is another 9 months, or in some cases, it could be 5 years.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. But it sounds like a very fun industry. And I know
It
you
is.
mentioned that you worked, I know you mentioned that you work directly with, these creators and these people that come up with these stories. What advice would you give to indie game creators aiming to successfully crowdfund their tabletop games?
Um, be ready. I think, like, prepare as much as you can. Play test a lot and, like, gather feedback. And while you're gathering feedback, like, get those emails to people, start building your email list as early as possible. Even the people that we talk to who are like, "Oh, I wanna pitch it to a publisher," I always tell them to, like, even if you wanna pitch it to a publisher, that publisher is gonna be way more interested if you're able to also show that you have a mailing list of, like, a couple of 100 people that has played it
Mhm.
who wants the game because you're already showing that you have market proofed it. Like there is an interest for the game and that makes it a lot more interesting. So if you are making anything, make a website for it. Put in a little like sign up here if you want to hear when we're launching, just because you never know what's going to happen next. And if you're starting, like just roll that out and prepare as much as possible for the potentialities.
Yeah, that just have an idea and have no idea where to start, are there any like programs or that you might recommend?
There are so many. My favorite is obviously on Facebook. There is a the Design Lab Facebook group that we use a lot. We work a lot with those people. There is also Indie Game Alliance. IGDA has a special interest group for analog games, which is also a great resource for like finding manufacturers and people who will do fulfillment and marketers such as myself and content creators and just like find a way for you to start. There's also loads of books are available on the topic depending on like what kind of niche you're in and particularly what kind of games that you're making. There is, I mean, when I started, I remember when Unplayed came out as one of the books that we would use for role playing games about like how to make better games and better game experiences. There is, gosh, I'm forgetting names now. um, Joe Slack has also written a bunch of books about like around game design when it comes to board games. There are so many different resources in terms of like books that you can read in order to become better, communities. I would always start with Facebook because it has the most communities, or find your platform that you really like, find indies and go from there. Like, hey, where are you? Can I join?
No,
And
absolutely.
convention for sure.
No, there's a lot out there, like websites, books, published, just online forums. Yeah, that's exciting. It's there and it's available for anyone who's like interested in the industry.
Mhm.
Um, but I want to thank you so, so much for your time today, Gina. I really appreciate you hopping on board with us and
Yeah.
in sharing your incredible insights with our community. I do have one final question. Wiggy's programs portfolio was built around the concept of I wish I had known X at Y stage of my career. What is something that you wish you had known that would have changed your career trajectory or the choices that you made? And what advice, resources, or tips can you share with our audience today?
I think probably I wished I would have gotten a mentor earlier in my own process. Um, it wasn't until I think it's 5 years ago now that I got myself a mentor in the industry. And I probably should have asked a
Mhm.
lot earlier because by the time I realized that I should probably get a mentor, I was mentoring other people. So, yeah, I think that's definitely like find someone who knows more than you and stay humble and learn from other people's mistakes, definitely.
Oh, that's incredible. Where are people able to find you if they're ever interested in maybe reaching out about the industry or finding out more about the services that you offer?
So, I am everywhere. It is Dina Said So, or Dina Said So Studio on just about any platform that exists. We also have our website, dinasaidsostudio.com, where people can find me. I'm on 70 different Discord channels, so I'm probably in yours already. um, and yeah, I use TikTok and Instagram a lot. I'm still on Twitter occasionally. For those who still hang around there, especially in board games, it's still somewhat alive. But anywhere really, I've made it my business to be easy to find.
No, amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I had a blast and I love learning more about the industry. And thank you so much for offering your insight with our community. We loved having you on board.
Happy to be here.
All right. And without any further ado, thank you so much, everyone, for watching. We hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.